everybody, and welcome to the Empowered CPA podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Scott. Today, I have asked an old friend to come back and do a second episode with me because, to be honest with you, I didn't feel like one was enough. So I am welcoming David back to the show.
Well, thank you, Dawn. It's good to be back again.
Absolutely. You know, I think that after our first episode together, I just felt that you had so much amazing information to share, and I just felt like we all just needed more. So I've asked David to come back today and talk about adult learning because I think that it's a big part of my life. I'm one of those really curious lifetime learners. And as we grow and as we age, I think the way we learn is different based on a myriad of different things. So I'm excited to hear everything you have to say about learning as an adult and how it applies and how it's different. And I'm just really excited.
Well, great. And I think we touched on it a little bit in the previous episode, but the previous episode was more about presentation skills and getting up in front of people, do's and don'ts, the ABCs of presenting, how to apply that into a virtual situation. But today, yes, focused more on the adult learning theory. And I know that you use the word learning, and I've used the word learning, but this is a process that anybody can use when it comes to crafting a message, crafting a speech, crafting a workshop, crafting your 30-second networking introduction to yourself, or if you're going to be doing that 10 or 15 minute presentation at your networking group. Yes, these principles come from training. However, these principles can be used in any sort of speaking situation, running a meeting. I should say that at the foundation of the adult learning theory is creating engagement with your audience. And I guess we could start there and define what engagement is.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, right? Because I joke all the time that a lot of people in my industry lose people before we even start because we're not typically a very engaging bunch, right? And you can have the best information, but if nobody's listening to you, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah. On my website, on my LinkedIn profile, I guess I'll throw my website in there now. Presentyourwaytosuccess.com. On the very first page, it says talking and telling ain't training or selling. And if someone is just up there blabbering for 30, 45, 1 hour, that it just doesn't sink in. So let's define engagement. And what I'm going to start off with is ask you, Dawn, when you hear engagement, engaging an audience, what comes to your mind?
So when I hear that, I think of a conversation or interaction, whether it's verbally or body language, where a speaker is talking, say somebody's up on stage speaking, and as somebody in the audience, I'm either in my head answering back to whatever they're saying, or I'm somehow participating in a back and forth relationship with that person. I'm not on my phone answering emails while I hear a buzz of something in my ear.
Yeah. You brought up several good points there. One, the body language. 93% of our message comes from nonverbals. Mm-hmm. Certainly body language falls into that nonverbal bucket. Eye contact, vocal variety falls into the nonverbal bucket. Only 7% of the actual words that you use is part of that engagement. PowerPoint, how someone interacts well or not well with the PowerPoint. I'm sure we've all seen someone who is at a live event. There's a PowerPoint and all you see is the entire script is written on the PowerPoint.
Yes. And the words are so small, you don't even try. You just, you stop before you start.
And that's a really good point because now in virtual world, PowerPoint, I was on observing an event yesterday morning, and the young lady that was, or I shouldn't say, it doesn't matter if it's a man or woman, because I've seen men do this same thing, where they have just a ton of information on a slide. But in the virtual world, you need to keep in mind, what are people going to be using to visually see this? And what if they're using a phone? There is no way that they're going to be able to see any of this content. Or what if they're using a laptop or a small screen or an iPad or something? I'm sitting at home with 3 32-inch screens, so I don't have a problem viewing it. But again, think about your audience. And think about this PowerPoint, and are they going to be able to see this ton of information on this slide? That becomes a distraction. Now that becomes falls into that negative nonverbal bucket.
Mm-hmm. And then, I think if that pops up on a screen, me and the audience, I'm probably done at that point.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I don't want to continue with whatever we're doing.
Exactly. And you also brought up another point when you were describing in your definition of engagement, and that was in your head. And that is a really good point, because people usually say, when it comes to engagement, if it's virtual, they'll say the chat, using polls and the whiteboard and things like that, which are really good ways to engage. Question and answer, another good way to engage your audience. But stories, relevant stories, where the audience can visualize these characters that you're talking about, this client that you're describing who is having a problem, when you're describing the solution that you provided to that client, when you describe the outcome, and make that story a client that all of us in this audience can relate to, if we're all business folks, for example. So getting into their head, the trick to this is, there's several tricks. But one trick is the clearer that the presenter is able to visualize the story, able to visualize what they're talking about, the more they're able to emotionally connect to this story. If they can feel the pain that the client was having, if they can feel the joy that the client had when they applied the solution that you provided, the more you're able to connect to that story, the easier it is for you to paint that picture with words, and your audience will see it and feel it easier.
And remember it.
Yes. Well, yes, that's a really good point. Yes, and remember it.
I think that's the key.
And that's what all this is about, is creating that engagement. So your audience will lean in, and will be more apt to take the next step, whether it's going to the back of the room to have a discussion with you, and certainly it's memorable as well. They're going to remember that presenter. I would think that if we were to survey your audience and say, which presenters stand out to you, when you think of a recent presenter that stood out to you, what was it about that presenter? Well, let me ask you that question. What is it about a presenter that stands out to you?
Absolutely. So I take a lot of continuing education to keep my licenses current. But again, I'm an insanely curious human. And accounting and tax continuing education is not riveting, as you can imagine. And there's actually one gentleman who teaches through the AICPA that I don't actually know his name, but I recognize his voice. He's Southern, so he's got this cute little drawl. And I can sit through an 8-hour tax update with him and actually listen to him the whole time, because he tells stories. He talks about clients that he's gone through this with, and he's insanely engaging, and he's very relatable to me. And he just, anytime someone else pops up on the screen, I'm like, oh, dang it, it's not him. Because he's so easy to listen to, and he makes everything, because accounting can get very technical, and he's very good at putting it into a situation that he's dealt with historically, and listening to stories is a lot easier than listening to code sections and why we do what we do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good example of a presenter. They're standing out to you because of that engagement, and that again solidifies why engagement is so important in a presentation. And one thing that you said, and I've heard this many times because I've worked a lot with IT folks who say, "Oh, this is impossible. There is no way that I can create training around this. It is so dry. It is so mundane." And I say nothing is impossible. Those challenges are what I love the most. I would love to work with these CPA persons. These
careful what you wish for,
because I could show them. I could help them to understand how to incorporate some of those stories that you talked about, and how to break it down. With IT folks, for example, some of it gets kind of technical at times. Well, there are ways that you break it down into small chunks, and certainly adding relatable stories, having a compelling introduction. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? Two pieces that get missed, three pieces that get missed the most, especially in training, is an introduction. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And what benefit is this to you? And what value are you going to get out of this once we get to our destination or get to the end? You got to set the stage. What are we doing? Why are we doing it?
Why are we here?
Exactly. If adults don't know the WIFM, what's in it for me, boom, they're going to tune out right within the first 3 minutes.
1,000%, because we're all busy people, right? I think that we're all hanging our hat lately on how busy we are. And if somebody thinks that their time can be better spent doing something else, you best believe that's what they're going to do.
Right. Right. And the same process, the setting the stage, can be used for someone who is going to be presenting at their networking event. What are we doing? The same thing. Who, what, where, when, or what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? What can you expect from me? What do I expect from the audience? Some of that can be used in any presentation. The other piece that gets missed is transitions. Let's take these CPA folks, for example, and based on the way that you've described this, I'm guessing that they're going from point A to point Z without stopping in between, correct?
Without our government mandated breaks, yes. Yes.
Okay. There you go. Now there's one of those things that falls into a nonverbal bucket. If you know you're supposed to take breaks, and the presenter is not giving you breaks, now that's all you're focused on.
Yeah. Like, I need another cup of coffee.
Exactly. Got to go to the restroom or whatever it happens to be. Or, something as simple as, okay, I'm going to just spend 10 minutes speaking about this subject. And now it's 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, and they're still talking. What's happening?
Right. We don't trust you anymore.
Yes. And again, that falls into that nonverbal bucket that the people are going to tune out. Wait a minute. He said 10 minutes. My wife, I use this example a lot. She was at an event a while back, and it was in the agenda, lunch at noon. 2:00. The woman was still speaking. I can't imagine what I would be going through if I was in that audience. Again, I'm sure there were people just falling out of their chairs on that. So let's go back to the three things that get missed most. One is setting the stage. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And what value will you get out of this once we get to the end? The second piece are transitions. Now, I brought up the CPA stuff because here, in any situation, people are presenting possibly new information. Now, me as the presenter, I know this stuff. I know this information. I can talk about presentation skills all day, the adult learning theory, and get into all of this technical mumbo jumbo about it. But in many cases, my audience is hearing this for the very first time. So I've got to kind of gently present it or present it in a way that's in small chunks. Finding opportunities for reviews, asking questions, telling those stories, and like I said, in small chunks, and providing a transition. Okay, we're going to talk about that there are 8 principles for the adult learning theory, and so now we're going to focus on the first one, and the first one is primacy and recency. We go into it, we talk about it, we have a discussion about it, we give examples about it. Okay, now that we've talked about primacy and recency, what did you learn from it? What little nugget have you taken away from this? I'm asking this to my audience. So now, by asking them, getting them to think about what they took away from it, getting them to search their brain for, wait a minute, what was it? What did I learn? Hold on a second. Getting them to wake up, that's going to make it stick. Okay, now that we've spent time on primacy and recency, let's move on to the next one, which is the principle of ownership. And then possibly asking a question up front. Based on what you read about principle of ownership, what do you think that means? Challenging my audience. So giving it in small chunks versus just talking for an hour.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I think that I personally struggle with the transitions because I can be kind of awkward sometimes. So I love the idea of that being built in when you're helping people craft these presentations. Does it depend on the person, or I don't even know what I'm trying to ask you, but I, the person, would like to have like an outline of what I'm talking about, but a word for word speaking engagement would give me a ton of anxiety. So what is that? So does this all get crafted before? Is it personal? How does that work?
So, great question. So if I understand your question correctly, where do you start, or where do I start if I'm working with someone to help them craft their message?
Yes.
So first, I would want to understand, who is your audience? What are you going to speak about? What is your topic? And sometimes they may not even know the topic, which is fine. But who's your audience? Why are you speaking to this group? What is it that they want to learn? So I want to understand that first. Okay. And then once I understand that, then the next thing, and this is the piece, this is the $1 million piece right here that I'm giving away for free. And this is the piece that eliminates a lot of anxiety when it comes to people thinking about, how am I going to craft this message? I need to speak in front of this group. I don't know where to start. I've got to create training. I have no idea where to start. I want to create a workshop, but I haven't a clue. I'm overwhelmed with where I need to start. Well, you need to start with the conclusion first. And that is that now that you know who your audience is and why you're speaking in front of this audience, you need to understand, when you get to the end of your presentation, whether it's 30 seconds, 15 minutes, a full day, whatever it is, you need to think about, when we get to the end, what is it that they must remember? What are the 4 or 5 things? It depends on the length. If it's 30 seconds, what's the one thing? What's the 2 things that they must remember from this 30-second introduction at the network event? So if they forget everything else, what are 2 things that they must remember? So that right there eliminates a lot of the anxiety. So imagine you're standing in front of the audience. Okay, today, we spent all day today learning about how to be a proficient CPA. And to be a proficient CPA, you must understand point A, point B, and point C. And now that you have point A, point B, point C, now you work backwards. And now you start describing point A. You define what point A is. You give stories around point A. You design questions around point A so everybody understands it, because that's the key to being a proficient CPA. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
I like your soapbox. I think that's so important. And I think that and we talked about this last time we spoke, everybody got a little stranger having been at home for 2 years without the actual social interaction, right? We can all be on Zoom in our stretchy pants, but our nice top, and venturing back out can be very scary. And so I think that giving people some of these tools before they venture back out is very important. And I think we're seeing people go back to these bigger conferences. And I have clients who are in the AV world and they are starting to pick up, and I'm so excited for them. And so I know that through those different avenues that this is something that we all missed at some level and we're all going back to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, definitely in person. But these are also the same things that you would use in the virtual world. Now, the virtual world, you've got to crank it up to an 11, like Spinal Tap, the reference to that movie, because yes, you need to engage your audience, whether you're face-to-face or virtual. But in the virtual world, there are so many more distractions that people have. So there needs to be that engagement piece, again, needs to be cranked up to an 11.
Absolutely. I think one thing selfishly that I would love to hear more about is crafting that. I mean, I think they used to call it an elevator pitch, right? Like, who are you in a very short time to where you hook somebody? I find this challenging personally because I have my toes in a lot of different things. And so to sum up what I do in a very short time period can be very hard. Or when I'm writing something for like a news publication or something, and they're like, tell us what you do. Mm-hmm. I'm always like, oh, I'm just, da, 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 da. But I think it's so important to carefully curate this. How do you help people with that?
That's a great question. So I start with, there are two foundational things that I like to think about before crafting the actual message. The first is that whatever the message is, it should speak more about how you help people versus I do this, I do that. So it should be more about the outcomes that you have been able to provide. The second is something I learned not too long ago that I've applied that seems to make it easier for me for those, because I always felt uncomfortable saying I do this and I do that. And somebody said it's like I forget the song, I, the Frito Bandito. Yeah. And the way that he described it is that the types of clients that are attracted to me or the types of people that are attracted to me are, and a third foundational piece when it comes to the elevator piece is you want to craft it in a way that encourages the other person to ask a question. So that's when you can go in a little bit deeper. For example, the types of clients that are attracted to me are trainers, educators that are looking to incorporate additional engagement and additional sales into their presentations.
I love that.
Now, that might create a question to come back, well, how do you do that? Now you can go into a more deeper discussion of how you do that. But I think that at the foundation, it should be what success you've been able to provide, and the types of clients that are attracted to you could be one way of adding something to it, and designing it in a way that gets the person to ask a follow-up question.
Well, and crafts that engagement. It builds it in.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because everyone's going to come to you with something, right? When I say I help passionate entrepreneurs, people are usually like, what the heck does that mean? Right. But that is kind of how I've crafted who's attracted to me. I definitely attract a certain type of entrepreneur, and typically someone who falls in that bucket picks up on that. Otherwise they're just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I know this isn't a good fit. Right.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that for a moment. You help entrepreneurs do what? Well,
so I help passionate entrepreneurs run their business more effectively and understand in an approachable way their tax and their accounting, because I think it's pretty clear that most people don't start a business hoping to spend all their time doing tax and accounting.
Right. So let me dig a little bit deeper. That's good stuff. But because you've helped them do their taxes, what benefit has that had for that business owner? So
I love this. I'm so uncomfortable right now. Talking about myself is not my favorite. I generally say that, nobody really likes the thought of investing in their hard-earned money in tax and accounting, because we don't necessarily provide something tangible at the end of our engagement, right? When I'm done working with you, I hand you a tax return, but no one can understand it. But what I do provide is somebody who knows your business, is acutely aware of the things that can affect you. I know the ins and outs, what you're facing as far as things that are going really well and things that are going very poorly. And at different stages in your entrepreneurial journey, you'll need different types of services. But if you have somebody like me who can step in when you need somebody to step in, I'm there. I'm up to speed. I'm an integral part of your business that, kind of comes and goes with what you need.
Okay. All right. Okay. We're going to dig deeper. All right.
Hey, guys, I can't run away.
Yeah. Well, because this is, I'm demonstrating my process.
No, I know. Oh my God.
And okay, you know their business, you know the ins and outs, you know what works, you know what doesn't work. You are someone who steps in. All of those things are great. And because you do that, how does that help my business? What solutions, or what am I seeing changing in my business because you do that? Absolutely.
So the one thing that I think is that I see the most often that takes a lot of pressure off of a client is when I step in and I help, your tax deadlines, what taxes you're subject to, right? Like, I have a client I just onboarded, and he has this incredible fruit stand, which I'm obsessed with. And he's the nicest. And he also happens to be attached to my favorite grower. So they grow all of my plants and my vegetables and stuff. And he has all of these different products in his business. And one of his biggest stress points was he didn't know if he was subject to sales tax. He doesn't know when sales tax is due. He signed up for an account, but then never filed anything. So he was getting all of these notices.
Okay.
And
so I'm going to stop you there. Okay. Okay. I got the information. I'm going to have to dig another level deeper. Okay. This individual, now that he understands his deadlines, he understands the sales tax, you know about his business. Again, by knowing my tax deadlines, knowing my sales tax, yes, those are important. But how does that help me make more money? What benefit, what value does this have? Yes.
So by knowing your deadlines and knowing what is expected of you, you can spend less time doing the tasks around those functions of your business and more time focusing on your actual business, which is what generates your money.
There you go.
Da, da, da.
There's the solution. So that's the solution that you're providing to them. The problem is, here's the story. The story that you tell, that you incorporate into your presentation or into your pitch is, what was the problem? The problem was they didn't know his tax deadlines. I didn't know about sales tax. You can talk about other problems that they had as well. The solution that you provided was to get to know their business, get to know the ins and outs and all of that. And the solution or the outcome was now they have more time to focus on their business. They don't have to focus on these tasks around overwhelming tasks around tax and all of that. And because he has more time in selling, he's now making more money.
Exactly. Oh, that's a, it's funny because I think in my head, as we're going down that's what I see, right? That's obviously where my experience is, but it's like any good business, I think, right? Sometimes it's hard to articulate things that are just so ingrained because we're in it every day. Right. And to me, it's like, well, of course that's what happens, but digging down all those layers to actually be able to articulate in a very short, concise way. Right.
And that's the benefit of a coach or someone on the outside looking in. I have a coach. I have to have help because we are so close to it. We start articulating and maybe rambling and not really getting to the point. And by someone on the outside listening to what you're saying, hearing keywords, able to facilitate the discussion in a way.
So I would imagine that the process we just went through is also a good exercise for starting to craft a presentation, getting all the way down to that base layer of what are we trying to do, and then crafting the presentation around that.
Exactly. And that's part of the objectives of the end. People will say, well, I'm going to make this presentation and I want people to walk away with understanding how to make more money. Well, okay, they're going to make more money. And because they're making more money, how will that benefit the organization? Well, they'll be able to do more stuff. Well, what kind of stuff? So it's digging down to exactly what the core of that objective is. And what I have found, even in my career in training and development and people in the business of training and development, is really understanding the difference between an objective and a task. So it's digging down to that core level. And in this case, what we dug down to was the objective is giving your client more time to focus on the business so they can make more sales and not having to spend as much time on the overwhelming tasks of all of this tax mumbo jumbo.
Nobody loves it. So weird.
Exactly. So one thing that we said we were going to talk about today was the adult learning theory. And certainly what I've talked about is, engagement. And I've incorporated many of the pieces. I didn't identify them. Yes, in one example, I talked about the primacy and recency being one of the principles, the principle of ownership. What I want to say now is if folks go to my website, presentyourwaytosuccess.com, and up at the top, click on Get the ebook, you can download a free copy of my ebook on the adult learning theory that goes into a very high level overview. That's what I'm looking for. High level overview. And you'll see some nice little pictures of me in there as well. So do we have another minute or so?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I have a copy of this ebook. Everybody should definitely download it. It's beautifully done. And I think that there's something in here that everybody could take away for sure.
Yeah. Because we're getting to the end, I wanted to ask you a question. Was there anything that stood out to you when you looked through it?
I think that one thing that really stood out to me is that so there's this beautiful graphic of a circle with the different wedges of the different types and different things that go into this. I think what I see is things that I can point to historically that I've learned in various things like piecemealed together, but it's a really incredible way that you've put all of these different things together as a unit and really identified how they work together.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yes. So I want to talk about, and thank you for that. And you gave a great visual on that. I love the graph that's been created. I had someone else create this for me, but I want to talk about one of the pieces, and that's the principle of complexity. All of these things are important. All of them can be, that you don't have to use them in a certain order. All of them just need to be applied appropriately during the crafting of your message and the delivery of your message. So the principle of complexity is all about understanding the current knowledge level of your audience. With IT folks and what you've described with a CPA is that sometimes a presenter will go in and overwhelm their audience with too much data. I saw it all the time with IT folks that didn't understand the principles of the basics of facilitation. But the principle of complexity is understanding where your audience is now. And I like to use the visual of a swimming pool. That on one end of the swimming pool, you have the shallow end, and on the other end of the swimming pool, you have the deep end. Have you ever been, well, I think you described this already with the CPA, where you were a participant and the presenter immediately started talking about very complex principles, very complex stories or analogies or things that you just couldn't relate to. And because you were giggling, I'm guessing yes.
So I actually have a funny story about that, just a short story. Sure. My first year out of college, I went to work for this firm that was run by an insanely amazing, just the best group of people I think I've ever met. And we did a 2-day CPE every tax season to get caught up on all of the tax changes for the year, because there's a lot always. And I was nervous. It was my first one. The whole firm is in this big conference room, and my managing partner pulled me aside and said, "It's your first year. You're just out of school. I anticipate you will understand about 10% of what you're about to hear. And I'll be very happy if you understand 10% of it." And it stuck with me my entire career, because had she not done that, I would have melted down, because it was so complex. It was so fast. It was a lot of information. And I would have been under the impression that I was supposed to know everything that they were talking about. And so I've carried that little gem with me forever, because she knew enough to know that clearly she'd been in that position too. And by her doing that and her setting that expectation of the presentation I was just about to get, it really made me not question my entire life. So that's why I was chuckling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So setting that stage up front, that this may be overwhelming at times. However, now the facilitator has the task of taking that overwhelming content and being able to deliver it in a way that is not overwhelming, correct?
Correct. Where you understand more than 10%.
Exactly. So in this example, in the example I was giving earlier with the swimming pool, the deep end of the pool, what you described with this person, this didn't happen, but many times the presenter will come into the room and just vomit information, and then that to me is what's down there at the deep end of the pool. All of those complex analogies, complex stories, complex information, all of that stuff is down there at the deep end of the pool. However, your audience, some of them haven't even gotten in the pool yet. Some of them are still trying to find their swimming trunks, or maybe they're over in the kiddie pool and they are just totally overwhelmed or drowning in this information. So the presenter has the responsibility of understanding, where are these people in the pool? And there are a number of ways. We're talking about the principle of complexity from the adult learning theory, is first understanding, where are they in the pool? And you can understand this in a couple of ways. One, maybe there's a survey that goes out before you make the presentation. Maybe you talk to the person who has booked you for this. Maybe you understand the group of people. I see this all the time in networking groups where people will come in and they make their 15-minute presentation as if they are talking to other people that are in their business. And it just doesn't sit with the audience. It's overwhelming. So remember the swimming pool, visualize where is your audience in that pool. If all your audience is already down there at the deep end, then great. Then you can use all those complex stories and all of that complex mumbo jumbo. But if they are all over there in the shallow end or maybe spread out around the pool at different levels of the pool, one of the things from training is you always create your training or your presentation for the lowest level in the room. The level meaning the lowest, their current understanding of the topic, not their mental capacity or that. It's just their current knowledge of the topic.
So then I have a question about that. How do you keep the people who may be deeper in the pool engaged?
Great question. Now, if it's a presentation, there would be a couple of different ways. If there was a training situation, if it was a presentation. So let's talk about the presentation first. If you're able to, if you know who these people, well, first let me say this: there are experts who are down there at the deep end of the pool, and there are people who think they are experts.
Truer words have never been spoken.
So first you need to find out, are they truly experts? And if they are, and if you know who these individuals are, then if you are able to, then acknowledge that, Dawn, I know that you've been doing this for a number of years. If it was a presentation, acknowledging that. If it was a training situation, then I would then ask them, I know, Dawn, you've worked with this software before. I know you've worked with this process. Can you tell us a little bit about, how you've dealt with it? So I want to tap into their expertise. And
great comment.
Yeah. And sometimes what I've done is, in a hands-on situation, I may pair them up, the expert with the novice, and have the expert work with the novice one-on-one through a process. That
also gives a lot of really good connections for long-term relationships.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. Wow, we've been talking for a while.
You have so much information.
Yeah. Well, I can come back a third time.
Yes. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you. I think that, I'm going to have to replay our little exercise we did together. And if you guys see my website revamp, you'll know where that came from. So before we go, tell everyone how they can find you, just so we make sure. And I'll drop the links in the notes as well. But how do we find you?
A couple of ways. One, on LinkedIn. There is David Doerrier, Doerrier. You won't find another David Doerrier. If you do, for some reason, let me know about it. In Doerrier, you may find my sisters and my brother on LinkedIn, but definitely reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. You can also connect with me find me through my website, presentyourwaytosuccess.com. Please download the free ebook on the adult learning theory. Set up a free 35-minute call. We can pick my brain about presentation skills, facilitation skills, whatever. I won't sell you during that program, during that 35 minutes. However, if we discover you'd like to take it to the next step, we can talk about coaching opportunities. Also, if you are a training manager or a sales manager and you feel that your group can use additional engagement when it comes to their meetings with prospects or dealing with training situations. That is my ideal group, is working with a group of trainers, especially subject matter experts that, they're great with their subjects. They're great with understanding their subject matter. However, they struggle with engaging the audience and creating facilitation, because it's, as a trainer, even as a salesperson, I feel that they should be using what I call the 70-30 rule. 70% of the time, your audience needs to be engaged. 30% of the time, it's the facilitator facilitating the discussion in a way that gets the audience, gets them to discover the solution on their own.
I love that. That's so great. Again, thank you for joining us, and we should go for lucky number 3, I think.
Okay.
But thank you so much for your time this morning, and everybody. I know that you're getting so much from these conversations, and I'm just so excited that I can help share the great work that you're doing. As always, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else you enjoy your shows.